Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Giving, the best nonprofit podcast on the Boost Network, sponsored by Nonprofits HQ. This week, we've got Susan from the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society telling us all things about athletic trainers in the industrial space. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on Beyond Giving, Susan. It's exciting to have you here. I'm excited to learn and for our viewers to learn more about the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society and how you guys are creating positive change in your communities. So let's start with kind of a brief introduction from you, and then we'll talk a bit about what your organization does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been an athletic trainer for almost a decade now. I've spent almost all of my time professionally in the industrial setting. So for people who don't really know what athletic trainers are or what we do, we are healthcare providers who typically come from sports, right? So if you think about NFL or college sports or even high school sports, most schools or teams have an AT there who provides the majority of the healthcare for these athletes. Most of their issues are going to be musculoskeletal, concussions, heat illness, things like that. So that's kind of the backbone of our education, is that MSK assessment, treatment, rehabilitation. And then, of course, preventative health, making sure they're fit to be able to participate in active sports and so on. Now, AT for decades has been able to get into other fields where you have your typical active people. So think of your military or firefighters, dancers, even NASA, and then your industrial settings. A lot of them have athletic trainers available to them. And that's because a lot of musculoskeletal injuries, right, a lot of general health is needed and things like that. So that's been my background. I've done everything from manufacturing to construction to distribution, beer delivery. Yeah, so I've been able to work with all sorts of workers in this country. And that's kind of how we came to be, right? So our organization specifically advocates for providing healthcare to these workers, the ATs who provide the bulk of their healthcare, and just general education on industrial workers, the average American worker, and what we can do to help them be healthier.
Okay, awesome. And so how do you kind of provide that? How do you provide those services to those various groups? And are you partnering with like employers or folks in those industries? What does that look like for you guys?
That's a great question. So your typical model is going to be an employer who says, hey, we need more, right? We want a higher level of care for our workers. So they're going to typically bring in, it can be a third-party service. So this can be kind of some of your hospital groups, your AT-specific companies, physical therapy groups that provide occupational care services. I'm sure that's a common term people have heard. They're going to come in and deliver that service. Now, if you think about what occupational health or occupational medicine looked like 15 years ago, it was typically a nurse, right, who would do like drug testing, or maybe you'd have an EMT on a construction site if someone had like a serious trauma. I think as healthcare in this country continues to go the direction it's been going, and as employers demand more from their workers, honestly, as far as production, they've needed a higher level of care. And so, it's really good for me because when I think about the time I spend in traditional sports, so in education, you always have to you have to do clinicals, and they're going to be sports oriented normally because that's where ATs normally work. I'm with my baseball team, for example. I was with Radford D1 baseball for a season, 2 seasons.
So baseball is your sport. Earlier you said you all come from a sport, and so baseball was your sport?
Yeah, so you would get assigned a team, so you'd have to do a football intensive, and then you would get clinicals, like during the semester of the year. So I was with baseball, was my assigned sport, and you're everywhere with them. You're at lift, you're trudging through the snow to the indoor diamond because they're throwing bullpens, right? You're in the dugout every practice, every game, you're on the road. So these players have access to someone all the time, whether they're healthy or they're sick. So I know what, say, one of our catchers is like. What is his normal disposition? What does he normally walk like? How does he normally act? I know that because I'm always around. So when something's off, I can be like, what's up? Something's going on. And so workers, where they have an AT, have access to someone who is around when they're healthy, which when you think of how healthcare normally goes, When you're sick, you go see a nurse. When you chop off your arm, you call an EMT. And that's kind of what most healthcare providers are used to providing.
Right.
If you need me, you call me. As ATs, we're just kind of used to hanging around. And I think that's why some employers have kind of just drifted towards that, is because we're everywhere. Like, you can be pouring concrete at 6 a.m. I'm chilling at the concrete pour, just watching things go down. Yeah. You can be picking cases of beer in a warehouse and throwing them on pallets. And I'm out there, watching biomechanics, seeing how people are doing, So that's definitely a different model, but it's a really good model. And I remember when I was in athletics, I was like, man, everyone should have access to someone like this, especially your firefighters, your police officers,
right.
your laborers. They deserve someone who knows what they're like, knows how to help them perform better, knows how to help them stay healthier. And so that is really kind of an investment a lot of employers have been making. And again, some companies hire them directly. There are a few, I won't name them, but they hire ATs directly into their services. Some just contract out and say, yep, we want one of these people to be there for our teams.
And so what do you do with that information? So you said that, you have an AT there, they're watching, they can identify this stuff. How does that actually in practice work in, if you're working for a fire department or working with a fire department or a warehouse or whatever, what comes out of that?
That's a great question. So anything from more knowledge about the types of injuries we're getting or what's going on, right? So I'll give a great example. I've seen a lot of shoulder injuries. I'm sure that's very familiar to you. I've seen a lot of shoulder injuries in my time. And it's always very interesting to me how shoulder injuries, at least, chronic ones or ones that are not like traumatic, they have a different form, can occur from poor biomechanics or something else, not even going on in the body, right? Sometimes we look at the spine, we look at other reasons that someone can have shoulder pain. As an AT in the industrial setting, I've learned to look even at the work that's happening. So 2 great examples. When I was in beer, we would have guys complaining about shoulder injuries, or we're getting just repeat shoulder injuries. I'm like, what's going on with these guys' shoulders? And so when I was kind of getting the history of like, okay, tell me what, was going on your route or what you were doing. And they were like, oh, I was pulling down my trailer door and I just felt this pop in my shoulder. Okay, let's go over to your trailer door and see what's going on. So one thing we found out was a lot of these doors were sticking, right? Like, you think about a garage door over time, it just gets old and like terrible. Now, you probably don't open your garage door by hand.
True.
30 times a day.
Very true.
But these guys do. And so that repetitive on a door that's messed up and not smoothly rolling, and they'd say, oh yeah, I had put in a maintenance request for it 3 weeks ago, but they haven't fixed it. And so being able to work with the fleet department who does all their maintenance and make those a priority fix, and having preventative maintenance done on those, handled a lot of those shoulder injuries.
And so that's probably the benefit of bringing you folks into an organization, right? Is you have access to all these different things. You're looking at it from a different perspective, looking at different things. And then it's maybe it is, some treatment for the shoulder, but also fixing this door so you can prevent those injuries, things like that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so when the Athletic Trainers Society started, can you walk us through why it started and what that process was?
Definitely. So obviously AT is like a very big profession, and the majority of ATs still work sports, sidelines, dugouts, high schools, colleges. They're in those main settings, and naturally our main governing organizations take care of those ATs, right? So I think there's a couple of us in other settings who are kind of like these like redheaded stepchildren of the profession, because they're like, oh man, if you're not there when the whistle blows, what are you even doing? And I'm like, saving construction workers' backs one at a time, right? So that was really part of what happened with the society. I've been thinking about it for a really long time. Believe it or not, a lot of sports settings also have their own societies. So PFATs is one we really know. They're the professional football ATs. So all your NFL ATs have their own little club. You have the basketball, pro basketball. They kind of have their own thing. And a couple of the other ones. And as I was thinking about it, I said, industrial kind of needs its own space, not just because of being able to directly advocate for industrial ATs. AT education, continuing education, clinical exposure is very sports based. But when I think of all the things I've seen in sports, right? Or in industrial, someone gets a major concrete burn. usually is not going to be something you've seen.
Which I did not even know a concrete burn was a thing until I know somebody whose dad ended up with one.
Oh man, they're brutal.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they can get rough. I mean, I've seen everything from that, or even learning that like rubber tar, right? You don't peel rubber or tar off somebody because you're going to take whatever that skin is with it. That gets cut around and sent to an ER. Like there's so many interesting understanding some gen med issues that people have and how they affect them in the workplace. Heart disease, general medicine.
Oh.
Yeah, heart disease, gout, so having a worker who's having a gout flare up, right? Like knowing. So a lot of that stuff is not where you're going to get when you're dealing with the healthiest 2% of individuals in a society. And so that is something that I was like, we deserve more knowledge and education about this and the levels of exposure and things that our workers deal with. A perfect example I can give is heat. So heat, ATs are the leading heat experts typically out of your healthcare providers. Yeah, because think about it, football, your summer sports, even your marathoners and people like that, right? So we're used to heat exposure, how heat affects a body that's exerting itself and what that looks like and what saving that person's life looks like. That's put in our heads a million times over during our education. But in the industrial setting, heat looks way different. It's not like football where we're saying, oh, we're pads, we're no pads today, or we're canceling practice, or no two-a-days, or we're limiting exposure outside. For workers, it can be a 10-hour day, 12-hour day, and odds of you canceling the day for a company is
pretty slim.
Very slim. And so how are you navigating heat with these workers to keep them safe, to prevent them from some of these illnesses? You see military and agriculture, these people have really high rates of certain diseases because of just the time they're exposed, not even just that heat. So it's education like this that was really sticking out to me of like, man, we really need a place to bring ideas together, educate, advocate for ourselves, and educate like workers, employers, even general people about what we do. I think even for a worker who's like, oh, my workplace just got an AT, what does this mean for me? If they go and they look up athletic trainer online, they're going to be watching, basketball, somebody running out there, and they're going to be like, that's never going to happen to me. And so we are kind of an arm to educate and say, this is what this means. This is what they can do. This is how they can guide your care even.
And I think that's so important too, because after we first met, that's exactly what I did. Google what the hell is an athletic trainer, right? What do they do? And that's what I saw. Sports, all this stuff. So taking that idea and putting it into the general workforce and providing that same access is such an amazing idea. So what have you kind of, in doing this, what have you guys learned about like the relationship with employers versus employees, working conditions, and what types of things are kind of next for that?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. I think, man, we've been through so much lately, right? Like you see how the world changes and we see really key how that affects employment. COVID, for example, we were testing everybody in sight, right? Because a lot of employers leaned on their healthcare providers of like, you're doing all this testing, you're figuring out who's doing what, so we leaned on, our clinical groups, our physicians who back us and organize and supervise us. And that was a totally different world. And then post that, you've kind of had like a lot of the mental health drive, right? So like the past few years have been a lot of a focus on mental health. And I've definitely seen firsthand, like the mental health struggles of the working population, which is usually pretty reflective of the country because everyone here works for the most part. Ideally, I mean, we got a lot of people, unfortunately, not working these days, but everyone for the most part is going to be working. And so we really get a view into how people are feeling, what's bothering them, what's going on. So a really good example I'll give is the past year or so in the construction industry. I've been in the construction industry for the bulk of the past three and a half years. And the past year or so, we've really focused on things like financial education, mental health, self-care, and personal well-being, because that's just kind of what everyone's struggling with, right? They just don't know what to do. They're having family problems. And so that's been a huge evolution that I've seen recently. I think as American healthcare continues to trend in a direction of
awful. Let's just be honest.
No, absolutely. As it continues to trend the way it's trending, Man, I really think we're going to see a continued focus on prevention, well-being. And that's another great thing about being ETs. We see a lot of things before they're going to become a problem. And part of our job is, it's actually a pillar of our clinical practice is health is like wellness, prevention, risk reduction. So looking at people who have, kind of harmful tactics, ZINs or VINs or velos or whatever those things are called, that has been something I have been on a soapbox for a long time, because that's risky behavior, right? You take a nicotine addiction and make it very comfortable for people. So even before that was vaping. So I think as we continue to see, screen time has been a big thing that I've been focusing on for myself as well, okay? But for everyone. So kind of building these habits, seeing how do I help you build a life and reduce your risk of even needing to be in the healthcare system, because we know how tough it is, but also getting you there when you need to be there. I deal with a lot of people you can imagine who haven't seen a doctor in 15 years. And I'm like, okay, you have many problems, friend. Like I'm seeing some of them just from this evaluation. I'm going to get you to a GP. You need a primary care physician.
Definitely.
Let's make it happen. And then just encouraging them to keep taking care of themselves. A lot of people don't do well with their health because they may go to the doctor, but then they don't take their meds, or they skip their follow-up, or this and that. And again, as ATs, our job is to know our workforce, our population, our people, and say, hey, did you do the thing? Did you do what you had to do?
Right.
So we're on them all the time, and it's free for them. It doesn't cost them anything. And that's the great thing, is we don't bill insurance. We don't do any of those things. And that lets us focus on the people at the end of the day.
It's such a holistic approach, which I didn't know until this conversation. You hear that a lot in healthcare. I take a holistic approach to your healthcare. But you never actually get that, right? You were talking about financial health and understanding there. You're talking about people, the way they do their job, the way they physically perform their job, the mental health around things that are going on, which is not very common. So that's really cool. But now you said you don't bill insurance, you don't do these things. It's free for the employee. So how do you fund the industrial athletic trainers, and where does the time and the cost actually get covered?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for my organization, for our society, we're funded through our stakeholders, right? So our sponsors, even employers who employ ATs. So those are like AT specific employing companies. They sponsor a lot of our things. And then of course, ATs who want to be members sponsor a lot of our things. For how care gets to the worker, it's typically going to be the employer sponsoring that thing. So they're going to pay however they decide to pay for an AT's services. And sometimes some people pay for ATs to be around whenever business is open, right? So I remember when COVID happened and we shut down, I was at a rubber manufacturing plant in Arkansas. Been around the block. So we were all home just, kicking it up for like a month. I'm like, wow, we're not working. This is a little concerning, but, we'll do our thing. So by month 2, they were like, we need to start making money again. So they started working on, we realized this was not going to be any short, easy, pandemic. This was going to stretch. So they started working on getting us back to work. And one of the first things the plant manager said is, we need these ATs in here before we get anybody in this building. So they were they immediately thought of us, especially probably because it was the health crisis going on. But they said, let's get them in here and work on, reopening. So usually the employer is going to fund that. And we were pretty much 24/7. Anytime the plant was open, we were there kicking it. And so guys could come to us whenever they needed anything. We didn't have to have these short little visits because you got to move on to the next person.
Right.
If you are having a mental crisis because you and your wife got into a fight and you slept on the couch and this and that, and you're, feeling like you're not worth anything, we can talk for an hour and a half. That's fine. I don't bill insurance. I'm like, take a seat. We'll be here a while,
That's interesting. And the fact that you said the employer brought you in because they recognize that need, is that very common? Because I would wonder what the educational piece, like for the employees to take advantage of it, but also the employers to let you guys in, to bring you guys in to do that. I would wonder what that looks like. Because, you've got these large retailers, one of the largest retailers in the world. A friend works in one of their warehouses, and it's just not a great environment, right?
Yeah.
But for them, they're like, what we're doing is working. Margins are amazing.
We're gonna
keep going.
Yeah.
So how do you get employers to kind of step back and realize that in the long run, this is actually going to be better?
That's a great question. So There are two main reasons that I would say employers invest in an AT for their workers. The first one, which to me is not the ideal one, but the workers will benefit, so it's worth it, is a high rate of musculoskeletal injuries. So they got a lot of back injuries, they've got sprains and strains, they've got just gnarly. I've looked at some claim totals on workman's comp for some companies over even a year, and you're talking millions of dollars, right? So sometimes it is because, okay, this is getting out of control. Where can we invest? Maybe they've tried, a couple other ideas, but if they land on the AT, I know very few employers who get an AT and don't go like, that's beautiful, keep doing that. But their main reason is financial, like you said, the bottom line, their incentive. The second reason is going to be that employee well-being is a core value for them, and they see their people as their greatest, advantage. Their
as every company
edge.
Actually should.
Yes, and that's my preferred reason. So there's some people who, bring us in and say, yeah, we don't have a lot of injuries, we don't have a lot of stuff, but we want someone to be there for our workers and to understand their health. And if you see things we can fix, of course, like I said, some of those ergonomic projects and stuff, I mean, that would actually go in kind of the previous category. I know some who go like, we have a process that's totally screwed up. Can you do an assessment on the ergonomics and help us fix it, right? They're doing that to avoid negative consequences.
Yep.
Not because they think these people deserve to work pain-free. They're doing it for themselves. So that second category is really like the prime person, because those are the people where, for example, we had a construction project out here on the far west side that we had done a wellness survey. NIOSH has this thing called the Well-BQ, which is kind of just a way to assess people's general well-being. We just pulled some from that and did an abridged version for our workers. And we found out that half of our workers ate one serving of or less of fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
In a day. And I was like, what's going on? That is not good. I was really shocked by that number.
Why did that shock you? And why is it so important when you think about the construction area, right?
Well, I think it shocked me because I expected that there would be some, but I didn't expect it would be half. I guess I just generally like to think people are just throwing a couple of fruits and veggies in their stomach during the day. And again, it might be my bias of the work I do that wouldn't expect it, but I was floored. I was floored by that. And I think thinking about what not eating fruits and vegetables means for your gut health, for your risks as far as your diet is probably highly processed. So what does that mean for your risks of cancer and, comorbidities like hypertension and diabetes? So I was just like, oh man. And I went to the person who was paying for our health group and said, hey, a lot of these workers don't eat fruits and vegetables, and I can tell them to eat fruits and vegetables, but I think they need to get fruits and vegetables. Can we invest in them being able to eat fruits and vegetables? And they're like, oh, what do you think? And I was like, well, maybe we do a Fruit Tuesday or Fruit Friday or something. And we started having weekly deliveries of fruit. One day a week. And we would have workers, we had a huge table just piled high with fruits. And we'd be like, please come eat fruits.
That's amazing, Susan.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Because you also, I come from a software engineering background, right? Where a healthy, balanced diet is a monster and a bag of hot Cheetos, right?
Right.
That's just how we are. But when you think about vegetables and you think about fruit, especially when you're talking about folks that aren't, athletes that are making, on a $20 million contract, access to those becomes tough, right?
Right.
If you're if you're working one job and supporting 10 kids and your whole family and things like that, vegetables and fruits can be pretty pricey, especially here in Texas, right? Definitely. And so that's an amazing way to close that gap. And I think that really highlights the importance of folks like you, these athletic trainers coming into these various different industries, because you took this or did this survey, right? You learned that they weren't taking in the fruit and vegetables that they should, right? And then you solved it.
Yeah.
Most places, that's where it drops off.
Right.
You should eat more vegetables. You should eat more fruits. Box checked, we're done, right?
Right.
But the fact that you guys bring that all the way through, that's really cool. And then got the company to the weekly deliveries, that's insane. That's so cool.
They were so bought in, and again, that's why that employer who sees them is important. Is why I prefer, because like you said, most people say, oh, well, educate them that you need 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, and I'm like, why do you think these full-grown adults are not eating fruits and vegetables?
You need 5? Wow. Okay.
How many did you think you needed?
I don't know. I feel like a couple. Like, I don't know.
You need 5 servings of fruits and vegetables.
Wow, okay.
Every day.
That's a lot.
That's hilarious because, yes, so education is going to be part of the gap there, right? And then some of it is like how you were brought up. Like I had workers who were asking what fruits were. So I had workers eat pears for the first time, peaches for the first time. They just had never even had these fruits or tried them. And that was really cool to see like a 32-year-old guy eating a peach for the first time.
Wow,
in his
okay.
life. Yeah. And so some of it was introducing them, like maybe if you were forced to eat apples your whole life, you're not a big fan, there are other fruits out there that you can try. And then, like you said, I mean, I work with a lot of people who work with their brain, right? So, you know, a monster's only going to take you so far, but I can understand how that can be advantageous with your work. But a lot of these guys are out here pouring concrete and digging trenches. I'm like, you don't remember your early soccer days? And obviously that's not everyone's life, but I knew as a kid in soccer growing up, those orange slices were everything.
Yep, absolutely.
When you're at halftime and you get to just like rip through some orange slices on the sideline. So I'm like, you don't feel like your body needs like this good fuel to help you do this job. These people work with their bodies. That is, they may not be professional athletes in that they're on ESPN, but their body is what makes their work. That's
Right,
their paycheck. So in that way, professionally, their physical capabilities determine whether their kids can eat, whether they can retire, you know, whether they can provide. So again, getting them in that mindset of investing in the temple is really cool, especially having people who are stakeholders and say, yeah, we understand the importance.
Definitely, yeah. That's awesome. And I want to change directions just a little bit now.
Yeah.
Why did you, Susan, get into this work? Of everything in the world you could do, why did you choose this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So probably for some of the same reasons I've kind of like lined out, right? So growing up, when I was really little, I wanted to be a doctor. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor.
What kind of doctor?
I didn't even know. I was
Just a
just like,
doctor.
I want to be a
Yep.
doctor. I've been to my doctor a couple of times. They look cool. I want to be one of those. And so I wanted to be a doctor. When I got into middle school, I was in debate. And
Okay.
I realized I was really good at debate. Real good. So I said, no, I want to be a lawyer. I would make
Wow.
a great lawyer. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, through high school, I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I feel it. I'm good. I'm too good at this.
Paid big
And
bucks to argue. That works.
that's what I'm saying. And so my dad was like, no, you need to get a different degree before you become a lawyer. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you need to like do a medical degree or something. Like you need a background to become a lawyer, which he's not totally wrong. A lot of lawyers do that so that they can practice like specially. But he was like, yeah, you need some kind of like medical degree or something. Well, in high school, I was playing field hockey and I was playing sports at the time. And so I injured myself like many high school athletes do. Where'd I end up? At my athletic trainers in the athletic training room. So that was our clinic, you know, doing my stuff, what I had to do. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. What is this? What do you do? And so, you know, that's kind of how I got exposed to the world of athletic training. And then junior and senior year of high school, they kind of, you know, those pre-professional programs that
Okay.
high schools have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had cosmetology and mechanics and technical theater and athletic training, sports medicine.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are the odds of that?
I know. So my junior and senior year, I was in the sports medicine like pre-professional program.
That's
we got
amazing.
to learn all the stuff. We would cover games, you know, we would just roll with our athletic trainer and learn about this really cool degree. And so that ended up with me then going to school for that and becoming an AT. And again, most ATs are like, yeah, I'm going to be Friday Night Lights.
Right.
I'm loving the sports, you know. And I would say it takes your team going to the 14th inning and losing for the second time for you to go, is this for me? Is this where I'm going to, am I going to be out exposed to these elements all the time?
Right.
So I loved sports. I really did. But during my university education, we actually had an AT student association. And I was the president, only 2-time president in history. RU Go Highlanders.
Nice.
Yeah. And so while I was president, I got a connection with the Volvo truck plant
Okay.
that we had locally. So largest Volvo truck plant in the world is in Virginia. They roll out those big rigs all day. They're gorgeous. Yeah. So we got to go and do a health fair. The guy who was kind of over their like prevention stuff was like, hey, we're doing a health fair for these workers, and we'd love for you guys to like come out and talk about musculoskeletal. And I was like, yeah, our AT Student Association will totally come educate them. about, their bodies. And so we got some general chronic stuff, and we go out there and we had a booth, and we were surrounded by these workers talking about everything from rotator cuff issues to tennis elbow to plantar fasciitis, back pain. And they would like read the card. They're like, yeah, I actually do have like these problems. And that's when I was like, what? Musculoskeletal injuries with people who don't throw socks at my head. Kind of vibing. I kind of dig this. Yeah. And so that's kind of where the passion for industrial came from. I just really saw like, how do you people not know about these injuries yet? Like, who is taking care of you? And they're like, no one. And I was like, what? Because they actually didn't have ATs at the time. They do now, actually, but they didn't when we went there, and we're educating them. Yeah. And so I was like, why would I not take care of these people who are less likely to have someone with this expertise caring for them, but are very grateful and very much as much in need as my baseball team would be. And so I went straight industrial after I graduated and passed my boards, and I've been industrial ever since.
Nice. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
And so then before we wrap up, what's kind of next for the industrial athletic trainers?
Yeah.
What do you guys have coming up? And then how can the community get involved? What do you need?
Definitely. So what is next? Man, so for our society in particular, if you are a healthcare worker, especially if you work with any kind of working populations, you don't have to be an AT. You can be a PT, you can be an OT, a nurse. We love collaborating with our occupational nurses, physicians who work with working populations. We put out a lot of education. Some of it is free. A lot of it is free, actually. So if there are questions or things that you can learn to help, if you're exposed to workers, help them be better, help them take better care of themselves, please check out our education. If you have a topic that you would love to talk about, we'll take that as well. We invite a lot of allied healthcare providers to talk with us. We actually had the American Heart Association's CMO for prevention. He came on our big event. We have a virtual summit every year in March, and he came on and talked about heart disease and preventing heart disease, which was really awesome. Yeah, we have safety professionals speak about what they see from the safety perspective and how we as ATs can help. We have other healthcare providers speak. We had a PT speak recently. So I definitely would just love any allied healthcare providers, check us out, see what we're about, and see ways that you can, co-learn with us, teach us things. We definitely love the idea of growing healthcare availability for industrial ATs. And then if you're a safety professional or an employer even, and you're not thinking of ways to better take care of your workers beyond digital things, or like, oh, here's a number you can call if you're having a bad day. But
those EAPs.
The EAPs, yes, which have very low use ratings.
Yep.
Very low. There are ways to invest in your workforce, like having a provider on site, especially providers who are trained to be there when people are totally healthy. They're not waiting for an illness or an injury. They understand the need to engage, find warning signs, see risky behavior, and kind of intervene. Think about having ATs at your workforce. And if you're a worker who is like, man, we would love this where I work, that's another thing. Like, see ways to kind of tell your company that this is something you would find valuable. Because actually, a lot of these companies don't directly pay for these costs. Sometimes you have a premium that you have to pay for your workers' comp insurance or something, and you can actually route some of that premium to go to prevention.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so that can often pay for, in part at least, of having somebody on site or things like that. And I think, especially as we see a lot of health insurances, right? They're trying to get into the wellness vein.
Yep.
Which valid. They're seeing that people are just kind of tired of it. They're tired of, what am I getting out of you besides having to go through a circus every time I need to get some health care?
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of people are like, I don't even feel like I'm getting any value out of this. So they've been adding certain things to try and kind of prop up that value. Wellness being a big one of those. And it's very interesting for me to see how they go about that, because again, when you think about how for-profit healthcare and how for-profit insurance works, right? what is the incentive to take care of these people or even see these people as people and not just a number in the bin? There really isn't one. And thankfully, because of our profession and what we're about and what we do, we are fully incentivized to have a happy and healthy workforce. So even where employers may be more concerned about the dollars, we don't have to worry about dollars.
Right.
Our job is to take care of these people, keep them healthy, find ways for them to work easier, live better, and reach a higher quality of life. And that's our whole job. And we don't bill anybody else for that. And it really leads to great outcomes. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool, Susan. And where can people learn more about the Industrial Athletic Trainer Society? Website, socials?
You can find us on LinkedIn at Industrial Athletic Trainer Society. You can find us on Facebook at Industrial AT Society. You can find us at our website, www.industrialats.com. And really any of the socials.
Awesome.
Instagram, Industrial AT Society, and so on. So just Google search us and hopefully we pop up.
We'll also throw all of those links in the description so folks can find you directly. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the best nonprofit podcast on the Boost Network, Susan.
Woo-hoo.
It was amazing having you and learning about your background and your organization.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Zach.
To learn more about the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society, visit the links in the description below. Also, don't forget to like and share this video, and to learn more about the Beyond Giving podcast, visit us online at theboost.fm/beyondgiving.